Somebody out there must have wished upon a star because it's time for Magic by Design. If you're an old friend of the show or listening for the first time, thanks so much for tuning in. We are delighted to have you on board. My name is Ken and I am joined, as always, by my co-host / brother, Gar. Gar, how are you?
Hey, how we doing? It's a podcast. We're doing a podcast here. After Ken has finally overcome microphone issues.
Yeah, we had some technical issues this week.
Where we were sounded like robots, which I can sound like robots anyway. See, Ken? Robots.
That's range.
I'm an actor. Clearly, I've never actually started. Actually, no, I started in Snow White and the 11 Dwarves.
But you played multiple parts.
Yes, I was an extra. That's what they call them in the business, Ken.
Magic by Design is a Disney review podcast, and our mission statement is to cover each and every animated feature film released in cinemas by Disney. Should have mentioned that.
Yeah, that's what we do. We've talked about 41 of the 41?
Oh, no, this is 41.
40. This is 41.
Yes.
So yeah, we've done 40 of them so far, so kind of get the drift. And if you look down the thing and you see, well, the last one was about Emperor's New Groove, and this one is about Atlantis. I wonder what the concept of this podcast is.
But just in case, we watch a classic Disney movie, then we talk about it, and there's even a little song at the end most of the time.
Yeah, even when there's not really songs in the movies, we still make it work.
They have soundtracks, Gar.
How dare Disney not adhere to our format by putting a song in all of these films. Though, to be fair, as you said, they usually do put a soundtrack song, just so they can, get the attempt at a Best Original Song award.
Or at least some plays on MTV.
Yeah, or at least some, we got Michael Bolton. Who sings this one? I don't even know.
Maya.
Who?
She was a popular R&B recording artist of the time.
Okay.
Early 2000s.
I was 9. I don't know these things.
As Gar noted, this week we explored the mythical adventure that is Disney's 41st animated feature, Atlantis, The Lost Empire.
Or is it mythical? Okay, Ken, do you believe in Atlantis?
No.
You know what I didn't know, and this film taught me? That the legend of Atlantis came from Plato.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that. Were you not paying attention?
Oh, I did, but I just thought he might have written about it based on some other writings or ancient myths.
Yeah, the earliest known writing of Atlantis is by Plato, who wrote about this civilization that crumbled, I think it was 6,000 years earlier or something than he existed. Because they got greedy and all gluttonous, and then an earthquake shoved them into the sea. And people were like, wait, because Plato's a real philosopher. And it's is that an allegory? Or is that real? And most of the people are it's an allegory. Come on. But then it's but what if it was real? And that's how these things persist and become legend and still have films made about them in about 3,000 years later. Isn't that fun?
That is fun. It actually does stand to reason though, because the classic depiction of Atlantis is a crumbling Greek city.
Yeah. Which is it's an allegory. It's most of his teachings are about how we shouldn't give in to greed and as I said, gluttony and selfishness and all these things that cause society to crumble if we give in to them en masse. And we shouldn't, because Plato was a philosopher and he tended to use allegories. Plato's his famous one is the cave. The idea of the cave.
Disney are making a movie about that in 2025.
To be fair, it might have been a real cave. So it's that one might have been real. Who knows? It's just less grabby than Atlantis, isn't it? It's yeah, they're in a cave. They're staring at walls, they're seeing shadows, but they don't realize the whole world is actually behind them.
That sounds it's actually kind of the plot of The Croods.
I've never seen The Croods.
They're a prehistoric family, and
I'm aware of The Croods, I've just never seen it.
Well, they live in a cave, and they're all oh, the world outside is too dangerous, let's stay in the cave. And then they go outside, and they discover that the world is actually an expansive and exciting place. Well, the father does, so maybe he's been outside, but none of the kids have ever really been outside.
Yeah.
So but this is not about the Croods.
Basically it is. So yeah, Plato. People are adapting Plato for centuries now.
Gar, you'll be happy to know that we are finally out of the year 2000. We're in 2001 now.
Ooh.
That's 20 years ago now. Isn't that mad?
That
seems so modern at the time.
This film is better than all of the 2000 films. So, 2000 had 3 what I would call bad movies. So we're back into one that's pretty good. Yeah. So it's a real turnaround, a new Renaissance 2.0.
Yeah, you mentioned this at the time. This is another one I had no real context for.
None. Not even the main character. I'd be looking at it as I've never seen you in my life.
I recognize the main characters, but
I didn't even know Michael J. Fox was in this film. If you were what Disney film is Michael J. Fox in? Before we recorded this podcast, I would say, I don't know.
No, I think that's something that I knew at some point, but I didn't remember until I researched the podcast.
So yeah, I like literally nothing. It's right there with Dinosaurs as a film. I have absolutely
Dinosaur.
Same thing. Absolutely.
Dinosaurs is a 1990s sitcom that was much better than Dinosaurs.
Yeah, so I'm just erasing the other one from my mind. But yeah. So I've literally no cultural reference for this film until now because I've seen it.
Development started in 1996 following the production of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Instead of the tried and tested musical format, the production teams decided to go for an action adventure inspired by the works of Jules Verne, most famous for things like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which they adapted into a live-action movie.
Did
back
they?
in the day. It did. Yeah.
Oh, like an oldie one?
Yeah. It's one of Disney's big projects back in the day.
Wasn't there a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea film with The Rock?
No, that's a Journey to the Center of the Earth.
But wasn't there a sequel to that?
Yeah, Journey 2.
But that was 20,000...
I think Brendan Fraser was in the first one and he was in the second one.
One of them is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, though.
No.
I'm pretty sure it is. Well.
Atlantis was released in June 2001 and performed modestly at the box office. It made 186 million, that's 273.5 million to be exact, on a budget of 90 to 120 million, that's 132 to 177 million in today's money, 20 years later.
So it did okay.
It's considered a disappointment by Disney, and maybe that's why we haven't seen too much of it in the last 20 years. But it did have stiff competition because it was up against Shrek and Lara Croft Tomb Raider.
The second journey was The Mysterious Island, by the way.
Yeah, oh well, Gar, I just told you the truth and you wouldn't listen to me, so...
But yeah, like, if you watch this film, interesting that you mentioned Tomb Raider, like, I've seen the Indiana Jones films. You know, there's all those Jules Verne books. I've played the Tomb Raider games. I played the Uncharted games. Like... I've watched National Treasure. I've watched National Treasure 2, Book of Secrets. Like, this film is nothing new. It is your standard chalk adventure story. And they just do it well. Like,
yeah.
that's you can't go wrong. Well, I love these kind of films, because even if they're not good, it's like, oh, we're going on an adventure, there's myths and monsters and all the
cool
fun
machines
stuff.
And...
Yeah, fancy machines and some good one-liners and a good performance by Michael J. Fox.
And a ragtag bunch of mercenaries who come together in the end.
And become likable characters. And it's like, you can't go wrong. There is nothing revelatory in this film. There is nothing you have not seen in, if you played an Uncharted game, if you watched an Indiana Jones film, if you've read a Jules Verne book. You've seen it all before, but it's all just very good. It's one of those formats, like, just the adventure film format is so solid and, like, hard to screw up, even though this film, I think the closest thing it's a spiritual successor to, ironically, is Black Cauldron.
Or The Rescuers Down Under. That was pitched as an action adventure as well.
But, like, that's animals. Like,
okay, yeah, I get your point.
Like, the closest thing to this kind of film they have made before, especially without music, is Black Cauldron. And this is much better. So they did actually screw it up, because Black Cauldron's much more forgettable than this is. Whereas this is actually, like, this is just a rock-solid, middle-of-the-road family adventure film, which is actually darker than a family adventure film at times.
Yeah.
Lots of people die in this film.
Yeah, lots of death, lots of betrayal, lots of edgy language as well. And critics praised that at the time because it was quite the departure from previous Disney films in that it was pitched at an adult audience. You know, there's not much in there for kids. No wacky sidekicks, no animals that talk.
Even like characters like Mole, who are meant to be like comic relief, are like creepy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a little bit on the... You know,
sexual predator side.
Yeah, that.
But this is directed by Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise, who did Beauty and the Beast and did Hunchback of Notre Dame. So like there's a very clear, like, these are the guys that make the kind of serious films through line there.
True.
So it's interesting, yeah, because is this a kids film? Not really.
But the thing is, critics also perceived there was a lack of a target audience because it's not entirely an adult film. It's not entirely a kids film. It's somewhere in between.
It's probably a teen film more than anything else.
Yeah. They also criticized the absence of songs.
Well, like, I don't know. Like, I prefer these films having songs, but I'm not going to criticize this film for not having songs. You know? Just make the film you want to make. Yeah. I kind of hate that genre of criticism that's like, you should have made the film a completely different thing. And it's like, no, judge the film on what this is and what it's trying to be. Would I prefer there be songs in all of these films? Yes. I like songs. But I'm not going to be like, well, this film doesn't have songs, so cancelled. -5 stars.
Yeah, one of the concerns they would have had, and it was the same with The Rescuers Down Under was that adding songs would have upset the pace of the film, and they were going for that kind of fast-paced, action-packed, mile-a-minute kind of film.
And this is a relatively long film in the first place.
Yeah, it's like 90 minutes.
It's the full-on 90 minutes as opposed to like closer to 80 that the vast majority of their like major hits have been. So adding songs would have turned this into a 2-hour film, or you would have to trim other stuff to fit the songs in. And would that have worked? Because this is, as you said, this is quite a briskly paced, relatively tightly plotted film. There's not a bunch of like, there is some times where like we're just going to sit with the characters for a while, but that's meaningful character development. You know, they sit around the campfire and they tell the stories of who they are. That's important. You can't take that out. Otherwise the film is a lesser film and you care a lot less about these characters.
And when they come together at the end, it wouldn't have made sense.
Yeah, that moment at the end where it's like, oh, we're actually all a ragtag group of misfits that like each other instead of a group of cynical mercenaries who want to plunder this lost treasure for everything it's worth. Like that development doesn't make sense unless you have them get around the campfire and actually get to relate with each other on a personal level.
Atlantis is most notable for adopting a distinctive visual style of comic book creator Mike McDonagh. He's famous for creating Hellboy, amongst other things.
It's interesting you mentioned the comic book reference, because like when I was thinking about what other animated things do I think this looks most like, and the thing that came to mind is like Batman the Animated Series or like those 90s DC shows.
The characters are quite square.
Yeah, it has that same like square character design model, and like I think this is the prettiest film they made since Tarzan. I think there's shots in this film that actually look nice, as opposed to like Dinosaur and what was the last one?
The Emperor's
New Groove. Like Dinosaur looks horrible, and Emperor's New Groove is one of those like just middle of the road, it looks fine films. Whereas there's shots in this film where like, oh, pretty, you know, which it's nice to go back to that because there is some of those in Tarzan too.
Yeah, and at the time, the comic book style would have been novel. You could say it's very common these days, if not overused. But then again, when they did it for Into the Spider-Verse, it was raved about as this new format.
Well, they did it differently in Into the Spider-Verse as well, though, didn't they? There was like the frame rate stop motion-y element to it, like literally like panels on a page moving, which was as opposed to like instead of just aping the visual style, they literally like replicated how you would read a comic book on a screen. Fair enough, it's not exactly like, it's not like frame by frame by frame. Well, technically it is, but you know what I mean. Yeah, so and like, you know, WWE just had the Royal Rumble and all the stuff was like comic book based. And it just, there was nothing there.
They just did it for a theme.
Yeah, it's just like, we're just going to do a comic book theme. It's like, why? As opposed to here, it's just like, we're doing this different, and it looks different from every other Disney animated film so far.
Yeah, it has that hand-drawn effect, but it looks like it's for a reason. Mm-hmm. Whereas in like the likes of, I don't know, The Sword in the Stone or 101 Dalmatians, it was done to save money. But this was a conscious choice, which I appreciated.
Yeah, and I thought the 3D in this film looked really good, which is a nice departure from frickin' Dinosaur and Fantasia, where the 3D just looked absolutely abysmal.
Atlantis was released at the same time as these movies, at a time when the audience interest in animated films was shifting away from hand-drawn and moving towards films that used full CGI. As a result, Atlantis made greater use of CGI more than any other hand-drawn Disney animated feature to date. The final film contains 362 effects shots with computer technology used to blend the 2D and 3D visuals seamlessly.
It looks so much nicer than Dinosaur. I know I rag on Dinosaur a lot because it looks absolutely abysmal. It's terrible looking. But like, you watch Dinosaur and you're like, they don't have a grasp of 3D. But then you watch a film like this where like maybe they don't have a grasp of 3D.
Because they mask it as looking 2D.
Yeah, so maybe they do. They should like always just implement 3D and 2D until they really got the master of 3D on like the Pixar level where they can make something closer and closer to being photorealistic, as opposed to Dinosaur, which includes photorealistic backgrounds and somehow looks less realistic than freaking Pixar films, which is bizarre.
Like there's some really good use of the vehicles. They built on that from all the way back to Oliver and Company, you know, the 3D vehicles.
And yeah, there's a shot where they pan out of the submarine toward the start of the film and around the submarine you see like all the ocean around it and the bubbles, and it looks really nice. I'm like, oh, I remember when these films used to look really nice. It was quite a pleasant experience.
I think for me, that mixture of 2D and 3D is the real sweet spot for animation.
Well, like I'm fine with 3D animation, even though some 3D animation looks like really characterless and terrible. But that's bad 3D animation. Like bad 2D animation can look characterless and terrible too. Yeah, but yeah, I enjoy that mix. I enjoy I enjoy all of it. Do you want to make your hand drawn film? Make your hand drawn film. You want to make your 3D Pixar film? Make your 3D Pixar film. You want to go somewhere in between? Go somewhere in between. Quite cool.
One thing I found interesting as well was the characters all had a very distinct style. So they had that squareness, but like Milo looked very different to Rourke, to looked very different to I can't remember the girl, it sounds really racist, but she's the Puerto Rican mechanic girl.
Yes.
You know, like, they all had a distinct character design, almost like they didn't match, but like, that added to the fact that they're all different. Like, Moliere or Mole has a very different shape. It's funny that what's the name of the medic?
Sweet,
yes. He looks very similar to the agent in Lilo and Stitch.
I suppose all big black guys look the same to you, do they, Ken?
Well, we know that Disney have reused character designs.
Ken, Sean.
But like, I just like that they used different character designs, but they didn't look like they're disparate because it all came together.
There's like a cohesive animated template, but they don't make everybody look the same within it.
Yeah, exactly. They all have the different characteristics, different shapes. Like Helga looks very sultry, and there are times when you're like, these characters all look very different, and it takes a while to kind of get used to that, but then you get it because it makes them all distinct.
Yeah, it's like no one is like, you're from a different film. What are you doing here? But also no one is like, you look the exact same as that person.
Like, and we've had that in Disney in the past because, you know, Little Mermaid, all those films, they all have a very distinct house style where characters kind of look a bit homogenous. So that's a really great plus for this movie as well. Previous films, Gar, they didn't really get to go on a free holiday to research a location.
They didn't go searching for Atlantis, you're saying?
Yeah.
It's like, Disney, we need a submarine and we need to start go looking for Atlantis. We might find it.
Yeah, most of their research took place on the internet, which was, you know, becoming big at the time.
If we found this thing called Google. Actually, no, did Google exist in 2001?
Of course it did. Google was
Google was like 98, wasn't it?
Launched in the 95, 96, 90, yeah.
I don't think it was that early.
I think so.
I would have said Google was 98 at the earliest. Yeah, Google founded September 98. Go me! I'm right. So it would have been Google or Yahoo or maybe
Yahoo was big at the time.
Ask Jeeves. Did that Ask Jeeves exist?
Yes, it did, I think.
Alta Vista? Was that still around? I don't know.
During their research, the filmmakers came across the clairvoyant readings of Edgar Cayce and decided to incorporate some of his ideas, notably that a mother crystal which provides power, healing, and longevity to Atlanteans.
I like that kind of stuff. I just add a little layer of legend and mystery and go for the deep lore for Atlantis, not just like there's just a city sitting there.
Yeah.
There's these magic crystals that took over the city and tried to kill the city, but
also protect it.
But then the mother of one of the main characters, fought back and protected the city against the crystal running wild. That's the plot, right?
Yeah. Funnily enough, it's similar to the plot of the Dark Crystal in that the crystal is basically the heart of Atlantis, and then the people in power tried to use it for evil,
but then the crystal revolted.
And then, ironically, the king's wife had to sacrifice herself to bring harmony back, but then
not even bring harmony back, just to protect them under the ocean.
Yeah, but then the crystal punished them by hiding itself.
Yeah. No, I thought they hid the crystal. I thought that was the king. The king was like, oh, I've hid it away because no one should be using this power for evil again.
But I don't think so. I don't think they have that much control over it, so I feel
But the whole thing was he didn't want his daughter to have to suffer like the mother did.
Yeah. So
I think that, he hid the crystal.
But the crystal hid them as well.
Well, yeah, because they dumped them in the ocean. Flooded them. But his wife sacrificed herself to keep them alive. That's the plot of this film, Ken. And the way to not keep up during Atlantis.
Gar, I was getting there. Fear not, though, Gar. They got their free vacation in the end because they also visited museums and old army installations to study the technology of the early 20th century where the film is set.
Oh, so they had those elaborate submarines and all that technology and those planes?
Well, they had, there's obviously that's all Jules Verne stuff, that kind of steampunk style. But
which is all very cool, I think.
Yeah,
like there's the ending sequence of the film when they're escaping on the hot air balloon and releasing their
tiny paper planes, but they can fly.
Yeah, it's that stuff's cool. It's like, look at all these contraptions we have.
So they started with real military technology and vehicles of the time, and they adapted that to become more fantasy based.
Yeah.
They also went 800 feet underground in New Mexico's Carlsbad Caverns.
Why?
To view the subterranean trails, which would serve as a model for the approach to Atlantis in the film.
Oh, so this is what caves look like.
Yeah. But if you've seen pictures of Carlsbad, it is quite mythical and cool looking. So
it's like, we have to go to Mexico. I'm going to look up Carlsbad.
New Mexico, Gar. It's not quite Mexico.
Oh, sorry. Well, that's less exotic. Sorry.
So as we said before, the depiction of Atlantis traditionally is, Greek colonnades and, crumbling temples, but they decided to move away from that for this film. They took influences from Mayan, Indonesian, Indian, and Tibetan architecture.
That's a lot of different influences. By the way, these caves do look very nice. A lot of stalactites, stalagmites. What's the difference? Which one is which?
T for top.
Ah. See, whereas mine is stalactites because they hold on tight.
Oh, that's a good one.
They hold on to the ceiling.
T for top, might for bottom.
Might for bottom? That makes sense. The T for top one adds up. The might for bottom is like, all right, it's just the other one.
It's just the other one. That's how I remember it, and that's how I will remember it till the end of my days.
Why are they named differently? I get one grows down, one goes up, but like they're the same thing.
They're different things though, because one is building up and one is created from dripping downwards.
But doesn't one drip down from the other? Aren't mites created from tights?
I know, but they're different. One builds up and one goes down.
All right.
It's different, Gar.
Calcification.
Producer Don Hahn said at the time, if you take and deconstruct architecture around the world into one architectural vocabulary, that's what our Atlantis looks like. The overall design and circular layout of Atlantis was also based on the writings of Plato, and his quote, "In a single day, the night of misfortune, the island Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea." That's quoted at the start of the film. That was their beginning point for the animators and the writers in terms of their building of the world. The final pull-out scene of the movie, that was something I wanted to talk about. This is the one immediately before the end title card. Apparently, this was described by directors as the most difficult scene in the history of Disney animation.
So yeah, they like restore Atlantis to its glory, and there's a bunch of flying machines whizzing around. There's the Iron Giant standing at the edge of the waterfalls as you see the whole city bustling and rustling and back to its former glory. Why does Atlantis have a sky? I don't get that. But still, It's underground. How does it have a sky? I guess they're in a dome, but are they in a dome? I don't know. They shouldn't have a sky. They should just be like caverns up there.
It's magic.
All right, I'll accept magic. But yeah, that's one of those shots that looks very, very nice when they pan all the way out and you see all of Atlantis in its splendid glory.
I think the difficulty was that it was traditional, for example. So it started on a very small, what do you call a traditional page? It panned out the page the size of, like the equivalent
70 pages.
It's like half the size of a football field or something like that.
Why do we measure everything in football fields?
I don't know, because it's...
How long is a football field?
No idea.
I guess visually you know how big a football field is, and that's why Americans in particular, it's the size of 6 football stadiums. It's like, why don't you just say how big it is? I guess that's a point of reference. I'll allow it. But yeah, it's a very nice fancy shot in a film with some nice fancy shots. I think Atlantis looks very... Even when Atlantis is kind of crumbling and destitute in this film, it's very pretty.
Yeah.
It's like the ruins of the city.
Yeah, there's a lot of attention to detail here. And to your point, the shots are aided by the, more extensive use of virtual cameras here, which we've seen in other films, but they're starting to perfect that now.
Yeah, most notably in Tarzan, I think.
Yeah. They're able to operate on a Z-plane, so the camera is able to move through a wireframe set, and you can add the backgrounds. You can paint on top of these wireframes, but it just creates this range of motion that you wouldn't have had in animation. Basically, you have left to right, and you have some shots where they're coming towards the camera, but those were expensive to produce, back in the days of Sleeping Beauty, and they were difficult to do because you're drawing everything. So you're like drawing something that's far away coming closer to you, and there's always that bit of jankiness because, it's human hand and it's drawings,
It's like a flip book.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say as well, there's portions of this movie where you wouldn't want to be prone to motion sickness because there's a lot of moving going on. Especially the start,
I think Tarzan is worse because there's the Tarzan periods where he's going down the vine and they go into that like first person 3D perspective. And like then if you have motion sick, you're going to gawk.
Yeah.
This one I think is okay.
Maybe that's a Ken thing. And
if you have a fear of the ocean in this film, problems.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ocean things.
And being submerged.
They never explain what the giant thing that attacks them at the start is. I guess it's just the Leviathan guardian of Atlantis. I don't know.
Yeah, but they say it's mechanical. Like, is someone operating it, or does it have a machine brain?
I don't know.
Or magic crystal brain.
It probably is magic crystal brain, but they never come back to that. I forgot about that until now. I'm like, what about that thing that attacked them?
I wanted to know what that was, because it looked cool.
Yeah. Because I know there was there's the Guardian of Atlantis. It's Leviathan. So it was probably that. But where did it come from? Who controls it? Who created it? Is it one of the Atlantean weapons?
This is all the deep lore that we wanted for the sequel, but it never happened.
And more importantly, how come it's still operational when so much of the rest of Atlantis isn't?
Yeah.
I want a spin-off about this Leviathan.
Deep questions, Gar. One last note on the visuals. The sequence in the cave that contains the heart of Atlantis when Kita is taken over by the crystal. That's some of the best animation in the movie. The visuals there are breathtaking. And the iconography is quite cool. Like they created all of that. The letters, the idols, all that was created from scratch.
Yeah, all the language and stuff, yeah.
So, but you kind of touched on the story there. As we said, it draws pretty heavily from Jules Verne in terms of the influence, but in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, they only explore Atlantis briefly, where this is obviously set entirely in
Atlantis. It's an Atlantis film.
So it's not based on his writing. I think it's inspired by,
yeah. So and just the general tone of those adventure films. which is the reason this film there's nothing in this film that will surprise you. There's a lot of things in this film that are interesting, but none of it's particularly new or surprising because it all comes from these inspirations beforehand.
To your point there, Gar, linguist Mark Okrand constructed the Atlantean language specifically for use in Atlantis. He used an Indo-European word stock with its own grammatical structure as a base.
That must be a pretty cool little project. It's like, all right, because they could just make it gibberish, They could just make it utter nonsense, and nobody would know the difference because it doesn't matter. But they're like, we're going to get this linguist guy to actually construct a logical language that we're going to put in this film. That is an attention to detail that is wholly unnecessary. That really adds nothing, to the audience. That's an actual logical language that makes some degree of sense. But it's cool that they put that in there.
I'm not sure if it's the same guy, but there is a very famous Hollywood linguist. Maybe it is him. Maybe he's the guy that they all go to. But he's worked on things like the languages in Game of Thrones and
Dothraki as a language, and
Elvish,
the
for Lord of the Rings,
Star Trek. What's the one from Star Trek?
Klingon. Yeah. So there are people who make a living out of this. They're academics, but they construct languages for films, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, and languages are invented all the time. That's the reason there's 100 of them in the world. We all find our different ways to communicate with each other because every single part of it isn't made up. People go, that language, that's not a word. It's nothing is a word. All of this is made up.
Language is fluid. John Emerson developed the visual symbols. He made hundreds of random sketches to represent the letters. It's intended to be read from left to right, then right to left, and back and forth in a zigzag pattern.
Oh, so you go to and then you can just go down to the next sentence and...
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
That's meant to mimic the flow of water, Gar.
Ah!
Because of Atlantis.
Symbolism.
Yeah, very good.
Look at them doing all stuff.
There's another note here, Gar. David Ogden Stiers appears in this film as Fenton Q. Harcourt. It's a small cameo. He's a board member of the Smithsonian Institution who dismisses Milo's belief in the existence of Atlantis, but he's becoming somewhat of a Disney legend, Gar, because he previously starred in Beauty and the Beast as Cogsworth, Pocahontas as Governor Ratcliffe, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame as the Archdeacon. And in our next film, Gar, he would go on to star in Lilo and Stitch as Jumba.
Yeah. There's a lot of big Disney characters.
Yeah.
It's Jim Cummings level. Or the guy that does the voice of all the animals. What's that guy's name?
Jim Cummings?
No, it's not Jim Cummings.
He does a lot of the animals. Frank Welker?
Frank Welker, yes. Who does, anytime you see an animal in a Disney film, it's done by Frank Welker.
Or most films, like Warner Brothers, all those, he did it.
Yeah,
he's a freelancer.
Why does he do so many animal voices? Why is he such an animal guy? It's I could do any animal.
Gary, you twigged a note here in the credits. Joss Whedon worked on this film as a writer for a time, and he's credited in the ending titles, but he departed to work on other Disney projects, and he's quoted as saying literally not a shred of his work ended up in the final film, but he's there.
Yeah, well.
I find that fascinating.
That this dude wrote a film, none of it got used. He got paid and credited for it because that's how the unions generally work. It's if you do work on the film, you must be credited for your work, even though none of your work actually made it into the film. But how do you think he feels about that?
Yeah, because people are going to ask him about it because
he's in the credits, yeah.
And there are people who are fond of this movie, and you're like, yeah, I worked on it, but none of it's in the film, so technically I shouldn't be in it. You see people like even Edgar Wright who left Ant-Man, and they changed quite a lot of it. Mm-hmm. Some of his stuff made it in there. He doesn't like to take ownership of that film because they took it from him, and it's not what he envisioned.
But he's credited because that's the way it works.
Yeah.
And some of it is there's probably a line of dialogue Joss Whedon wrote. You know, hi, my name's Milo. It's technically that's probably still in the film.
He's got to get his check.
So there is probably something in there that crosses over, but it's a very strange thing. But I don't know how I'd feel about that if I wrote a thing and then they used none of it, and I'm like, well, I worked hard on that thing and it's just sitting there.
Yeah, but that's Hollywood all over, and even Disney films. We've seen this year after year. People work on these Disney films, it's not working. They get tossed, another team comes in, so it's part of the process.
And they brought him back for 2 Avengers films, so I imagine he's not... Actually, no, technically it would have been Paramount, I think, that would have hired him the first time.
Yeah.
Or Marvel itself, however that worked. But the second Avengers film was definitely Disney, so...
Yeah, he got his day in the sun. We noted the pace of the story, Guard. The initial draft of the movie was 155 pages, which is much longer than the usual 90, with the first 2 acts timing out to a whopping 120 minutes.
Ooh.
That's not even with the finale. So the script was trimmed back to to remove a few of the trials and tribulations that the adventurers would face, leading them to discover Atlantis earlier in the film and thus increasing the film's pace. So
yeah, because like they get in the submarine. The submarine's blown up. They're in the underground cavern. They get through the underground cavern. They have some confrontations with fireflies. They get into Atlantis. They have problems with Atlantis. Atlantis embraces them. They betray Atlantis. They redeem with Atlantis. Like that's literally, it's like boom, 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 boom. The film just keeps going.
Yeah, so like I'm glad that they recognized that the first version of this film is probably a bit overstuffed, and they pared it down, and it does really help the film move along. Like I didn't feel the 90 minutes at any point.
No, this is a good film. This is just a good film. It's not a great film, but it's a good film.
Yeah. Milo was originally set to be a descendant of Blackbeard the pirate, but that was scrapped. I think because it would have made no difference to the story.
And also, like, he's a nerd. The idea is, like, he's a nerd. So he can't, like, be descendant of a pirate and then be a goofball. So they made him, like, descendant, or, well, the grandson of a just utter... or a son of? Grandson?
Grandson.
Grandson.
Raised by the granddad because his parents died.
Yeah. Grandson of just like an archaeologist explorer, an Indiana Jones type, who's like also kind of a nerd, but also like discovers the world.
It's his life dream to discover Atlantis. Everyone thought he was a kook, so they destroyed him.
I thought they'd do more with that actually about his granddad. Like the character John Mahoney played.
Yes.
Whose name I will now quickly...
Rourke?
No, John Mahoney played the old guy.
Oh, sorry.
Whitmore. Preston Whitmore.
Yes.
I thought they were going to do a whole thing about how like Whitmore actually betrayed the grandfather and trapped him in Atlantis or something, or killed him for the book or something like that, and they didn't do any of that. Yeah. And I was like, oh, interesting.
Because we've had those plots before where, he went missing.
It's like, he died. And he's like, I thought it's like, he betrayed him and killed him. Duh. But no, they do. And even like when there's like the big Rourke betrayal and it's like, I'm taking all this money for me. That's a Rourke inspired me. I thought again that would be like, Whitmore sent me here to get all the money. Maha. I was like, no, Whitmore's actually a good guy in the end.
But he was double crossed by these mercenaries. But the thing is, we get the sense that they were selling themselves as military and legitimate, but then they're actually a group of vicious thugs.
Yeah, they're Tomb Raiders without Lara Croft.
Don Hahn said that the absence of the songs in the movie presented a challenge for the team, who were accustomed to animating musicals. So they were, all the pace of movies, we talked about it there a second ago, all the major events of the movies are always around songs. So to have a 90-minute film, which is longer than most, is really tough.
Yeah, this is a dialogue-heavy film as well. Yeah. Like there is like exciting action scenes, but all of those are punctuated by dialogue. Like this is a very talking-heavy film.
Yeah.
And then there's no songs in there. And like, as we said, Charles Dillon Wise are the people who directed this film, having directed Hunchback, which is a very like traditional musical theater film, and having directed Beauty and the Beast, which is even more so a very traditional musical theater film. So for them to go to this very dialogue heavy film, it's an interesting transition.
Because the previous Disney movies are punctuated by the songs. They break tension in the movie. They tell the story. They advance the plot.
And usually, they explain who the characters are a lot of the time.
So we had to focus a lot more on the actual interplay between the characters, the dialogue.
Because, if this was a musical, we talked about the scene where they all sit around the campfire and literally tell the audience who they are. Like, that would have been a song or a series of songs if this were an animated film. It's like, Mole, he digs under the ground. He's a bit of a creep. That's how this would have been.
Yeah. Truesdale said that we had more screen time available to do a scene like where Milo and the explorers are camping out and learning about one another's histories. An entire sequence is devoted to having dinner and then going to bed. That's not typically something that we would have done.
He literally just made the point I made, Ken. He's just he's agreeing with me.
Yeah.
That the absence of songs makes room for those kind of like character deepening scenes.
Yeah. So there is merit to it, but I suppose you do miss that format. But I think when you're watching this movie, you have to take it as it is, not what it could be or what other films are.
Big Hero 6 doesn't have songs. So I was thinking, like, have they made recent ones that don't have songs? And Big Hero 6 is one. There's like a Fall Out Boy song.
Yeah, at the end.
Which is, but like, that's just a soundtrack song. No one sings it. So I was like thinking, is like, have they got, like, because I know people like credit the Renaissance 2.0 was basically going back to the musical format.
Yeah.
With the likes of Princess and the Frog and Tangled and Frozen. So I'm like, did they ever not do that in the recent films? And they didn't. I haven't seen Zootopia. I don't know, does that have songs?
No, it doesn't. It's a noir detective film.
So it's interesting that they're now, they do, like, we have films that have songs and films that don't, as opposed to like the early days of these films, which are these are actually no, but that's not the case either, because like Bambi didn't have songs.
Yeah, well, it did like throughout, but you know,
like no, the characters didn't generally sing.
Yeah, that was one of the films where it was an outside voice singing about the characters.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see how them having like these different molds for these films at this stage.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes they weren't as successful at the box office, but you know, this film existed, so a Big Hero 6 could eventually exist. So there is merit for both, you know.
Yeah, but like it goes back to Black Cauldron. Ken didn't have a song. Yeah. Black Cauldron is the genesis of this, is what I'm saying. We should respect Black Cauldron's right to exist.
A few notes on the characters here, Gar, before we move on. Vincenzo is great. His wisecracks and one-liners are excellent.
Yeah. I like all these characters. There's none of these characters. Even Mole, it's like he's kind of funny because he's a creep.
Yeah.
Like,
and the thing is, he gets his comeuppance every time he tries to be a creep. He gets punished. So it's a good message as well.
And they would have I think if they were being more cynical about this, they would have smoothed over Mole because like he's too creepy, he's too weird. We can't put him in this kids' film. We have to have him like be more cartoonish or more like well-meaning. It's like no, he's just a weirdo. It's like during that campfire scene, it's like, and where did Mole come from? It's like, you don't want to know. She told me, and you don't want to know.
The thing is...
And they never tell us, and I like that.
In the past, we would have seen Mole as more of the dopey archetype, and they're moving away from that. He's a caricature because he's shaped like a mole. He has a mole teddy.
He commits to this bit, by the way. It's like, I'm the mole guy. I will dig into potted plants. I will be obsessed with dirt. I will have a mole teddy bear. I will forever drive around in my drill. Like, he's like, this is my life. And I will commit wholeheartedly to it.
I like how the introduction to Mole is basically him being the original Sherlock.
Yeah.
Because he's like, he told the story of Milo's life based on the dirt that was in his fingernails.
I believe you mean, Ken, the original Basil.
Ah, yes. Sorry.
The Great Mouse Detective.
Also, Milo Gar is Marty McFly, but I am here for it.
Yeah, he's just Michael J. Fox being Michael J. Fox, and it's a good performance with all the Michael J. Foxisms that are in all of Michael J. Fox's characters, and good.
And it has that neuroses and that kind of thing where that reluctance, I suppose, is the best word I can describe it, but it really fits the character of Milo being a nerd and he's a reluctant adventurer.
Yeah, and like it's better than Michael J. Fox's Stuart Little.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's fine.
Yeah, I enjoyed his performance in this film.
What did you make of Rourke as a villain?
I don't dislike him, but I also don't think he's a particularly good villain. I wouldn't be like, whoa, that Rourke, that's top tier Disney villain. He plays a serviceable role in the plot of this film.
Yeah.
There you go. There's your compliment, Rourke.
It is very predictable, and some of the actions he takes are very cold and calculated, and it really establishes him as the guy to take down at the end of the film. But he has a memorable design as well. He has a very square kind of military design, but he isn't one of the people I'd be remembering. Like, he's not a Maleficent or a Cruella de Vil or a Scar.
Yeah, played by James Garner, by the way. Good performance.
Yeah, it is a good performance. The thing is, people can dismiss that type of performance because it's just a military archetype, but he did have like a real kind of snideness and a coldness to him that, really translated.
Yeah, and then you got Sweet.
Yes.
He was like he's the heart of the film in kind of some ways.
Yeah.
He's the guy that gives Milo the big get up and fix it speech, so... Yeah,
and that is a bit of an archetype that we've talked about before. The black guy giving the magical wisdom, but it's toned down here, so I didn't mind it as much.
Helga. Weird character.
Yeah.
And that you feel like, again, similar to the way the grandfather stuff, you would imagine would have played out in a more cliched way. Helga, you feel like, would have had the, like, aha moment where she's like, oh no, these guys are actually my friends. The Rourke is bad. But no, like, Rourke betrays her and kills her.
Yeah.
Like, that's...
She is redeemed after the double cross with Rourke, but it's too late. Gar, she chose the wrong side, so she must plummet to her doom.
Yeah.
She tosses her out of the airplane, or the airship.
It's a weird one.
And I was like, as she was plummeting, I was like, oh, one of them are going to catch her, aren't they? No, she died.
And they show like a shot of her body. It's like, well, hundreds of people die in this. Like the start of this film is like hundreds of people getting on this giant submarine. Then the submarine blows the hell up because it's attacked by a Leviathan monster machine. And then like 50 of them are still alive, maybe less. And all of those people die too, except for the principal cast. So like hundreds of people die in this film.
It's that classic trope that all the people that are featured don't die, which is
except like Rourke and Helga, or what's her name, die. Yeah, Helga. Yeah. They both die.
Yeah, I suppose, but the rest are collateral damage. So like I think we go from like 200 to like 50 in like 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then it whittles down from there. Gar, of course, Kida is a Disney princess, but we haven't seen her in the 20 years since this film was released.
I think she's a pretty good princess.
Yeah, different for the time.
I think there's a little too much like Pocahontas going on between her.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Gar.
Her and Milo. Like so that doesn't feel particularly fresh. Like if she sang Colors of the Wind, maybe she'd be better. They should have just put Colors of the Wind in this film and then explain
Colors of the Sea.
How they suddenly can talk to each other because they know all the languages. Though I also kind of like the idea that like obviously most languages have a root in early just speech, and then it all branched off in all these different directions as continental drift separated us more and more.
It makes more sense than Magic Wind.
Yeah, it does make a little more sense than Magic Wind that they suddenly just understand all languages, and
they don't really like fall in love at one glance.
They kind of do.
They develop an affinity for each other, and he
heals her, and it's immediate like, oh, horny.
There is, but like at the end, we're seeing the start of their relationship. We're not seeing them married and the kids and all this stuff that we see at the end of most movies. But I'm surprised that she's kind of disappeared. Yeah,
she's pretty cool and a pretty like distinct design as well. You would have thought it's one of those they would have liked to break out. But I suppose this film was a relative flop, and they buried like this. Similar to Black Cauldron, they've also just buried this film.
Yeah.
So.
They really don't reference it. They make it available, but like it's not one that they promote or they've spun off in many different directions.
No, like you go to Disneyland now and there's Stitches everywhere. And then like Lilo and Stitch was released the year after this, and Stitch is still a prominent character that you can buy a plushie of in Disneyland, and that is not the case for anything from Atlantis.
No. We have a new death for a Disney villain, Gar. Rourke is turned into a crystal, then shattered.
Yeah.
That's new.
That is new. It was weird. So when he was turned into a crystal, was he like being controlled by the crystal, or was he still sentient until he got smashed by those propellers?
I don't know.
Because he touched the crystal and then like got full crystallized, turned blue. But then I was like, oh, he's dead. He's like, no, he's still moving.
Yeah, and then he makes his last stand as such, and then he's smashed to pieces. But yeah, I think the story is like, as I said, nothing new, but the pace of it is excellent, and the character development, the way they interact with each other is organic. I enjoyed being part of this group and following them, and I wanted to see more from them.
Yeah, and you even get like Wilhelmina, who's like just there to deliver some one-liners every now and again, and that's her entire role in the film is just to deliver some one-liners now and again, and thumbs up.
And like the funny thing is, in other films, she'd be one of the first characters like
to die.
To cut, but in this, like, she's like a featured character that she just becomes a reluctant member of the gang and stays till the end.
Yeah, and as you Audrey, whose name we forgot, good character, like she's like the 6th tier character, but she's like a good character. I like this film. I like this film more. No, I'm upgrading it. I said it's a good film, not a great film. Talking about it, Ken. Atlantis is a great film. I'm upgrading it. Ooh. Formally in the middle of the podcast in discussing the principal parts of this film, which is actually, again, I've done this rant before about how like people are like, you nitpicked it, you tore it apart. But if there is nits to pick, it's like all criticism should make the thing you're talking about better if it's good. If there's substance there and there's depth there and there's interesting things there, the more you talk about it, the better it should get. And that's what's just happened with this film. As we talk about these memorable characters and this well-designed world, and the fact that they went to the depths to create a language that has like symbolism of the left to right flow, and all these little things that they put into this film in terms of good characters and good story and good plotting and good action and good animation. It's missing the songs, but it doesn't have songs, so I won't knock it down for that. This is a great film. Disney Renaissance 2.0.
It's one of those ones that sneaks up on you because, as we said, we had no reference for it, and as you said, the more you dig into it, it has all the really great elements that make a fantastic animated film, let alone a Disney film. But I suppose the thing that consigned it to history was the lack of songs, and Disney only kind of I suppose, well, they are a corporation, they are motivated by money, and there is a fan base for this film, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think it's a case that they don't associate it with the prestige of A Beauty and the Beast and Lion King.
Will they remake it is the question, Ken.
I think there's a lot there to make.
I think this would make a hell of a live action remake.
Yeah. Like in the adventure style and like the snappy dialogue and the action.
They're desperately trying to make Indiana Jones 4. Just do this. Just do Atlantis.
And we've seen that steampunk style work.
Sorry, Indiana Jones 5. I've just deleted the 4th one from existence.
Well,
no, wait, 4? 3?
4.
Yeah, 4. So we're on to 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't blame you, Gar. But like that steampunk style worked really well in the Sherlock Holmes films with Jude Law and Robert Downey Jr. So like I'd like to see more of that.
It gives it this really unique production design, and as I said, the world of Atlantis looks all like really cool and different. And I like that it, like, Atlantis a lot of the time is depicted as like a really futuristic city.
And it has dinosaurs.
Yeah, but and in some ways like this is depicted as a futuristic city, but it's like depicted as a futuristic city, but that is 6,000 years old or whatever.
Like that's one thing I I meant to mention, where did the dinosaurs come from? Like, because like
they're under the earth. They just fell under. They got trapped in the bubble and came down with them, I guess.
But like 6,000 years.
Don't worry about it. There was no meteors to kill them.
But wouldn't they have been dead like millions of years before that?
Maybe they were protected by the magical crystal powers of Atlantis.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
By the way, Atlantis, remarkably good apocalyptic defense.
Yeah.
Because like, oh no, we're flooding under the ocean. Dome. Oh no, lava's overcoming us. Dome.
Giant magic idols protect us.
Yeah, magic idols engage. Iron giants, do your T-pose. Giant dome as I smash my computer with my hand.
Gar's getting very excited about the prospect of a live-action Atlantis.
Yeah, make a live-action Atlantis. That would be a cool film. You can get The Rock to do it. Make it a Journey 3.
No, I'd like a Milo-type character instead.
Who would you get? It's going to be Tom Holland.
Yeah, Tom Holland.
Let's
all
face
those
it.
roles.
It's going to be Tom Holland.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he isn't locked into that already.
Oh dear. Yeah, Atlantis. Thumbs up, Ken. I've talked myself into liking it even more.
You noted the lack of songs, Gar. James Newton Howard, who did Dinosaur, composed the film score. Howard chose an Indonesian orchestral sound incorporating chimes, bells, and gongs. The directors told Howard that the film would have a number of key scenes without dialogue, especially when they're discovering the crystal and it takes over Kita, and they would have to convey emotionally what the viewer was seeing on screen. Did you find that effective?
I think the score's fine.
Yeah.
Score is like the one thing about this film that I'd be like, it's particularly unremarkable.
Although I really liked the score. Like, it comes back throughout the film, but it starts when they launched the submarine and set off on their expedition. It reminds me of the Mighty Ducks. Yeah, so it's a kind of swelling adventure. Like they're also a ragtag bunch that aren't expected to do anything, but they, rise to the occasion. So I like that. That rousing adventure score. Even though it's generic, it will get me every time.
I have to go to the latest section of Garrett's shouts at critics. So the Rotten Tomatoes consensus on this film is Atlantis provides a fast-paced spectacle but stints on such things as character development and a coherent plot. And I'll give it a coherent plot, because the actual plot's just all over the place. It's not, you didn't even understand it.
It's magical mumbo-jumbo.
It's nonsense. I like that kind of nonsense. I don't care that doesn't really make a ton of sense. Who cares? It's a dumb adventure film. It doesn't have to be like, oh, every part of that doesn't fit together. But the character developments thing, I really would push back on.
Like, not only are they wrong, but they're like completely 100% wrong. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think there's really good, and it's a full bench. Like all of these characters get some amount of development, or at least some screen.
Yeah, even the king.
Yeah,
who he dies, quite early on once we've met him. But we see at the start, and then we're not really sure what happened there. Then he explains that his greed and his fear caused his wife to be sacrificed, basically,
and his entire world to be trapped under the sea.
And he dies because he could be saved, but he dies for the greater good. So like even him in his cameo, voiced by Leonard Nimoy, like has an arc. So I don't think that's true. I think this is a major strength of this film.
Yeah, and if there was the one substitute for the songs is much better character development, that's the case in this film. Good job, Atlantis. Bad job, critics, you're wrong.
The legacy of this film, Garrett, we've mentioned it. Due to the lackluster box office performance, Disney quietly cancelled both a spin-off television series and an underwater attraction at Disneyland's theme park. It was replaced by Finding Nemo, which was much more successful.
This film didn't even get a Best Animated Feature nomination.
No. Which you think
I think it deserves it.
For the technical achievement and the visual style alone, you thought it would have been worth it.
Let me look up what did get a Best Animated
there you go.
Feature nomination while you continue.
A direct-to-video sequel, Atlantis, Milo's Return. What does this mean by return? Like, is he returning to the real world because he stays in Atlantis at the end?
We'll find out when we eventually watch it.
Was released in 2003. The film has become somewhat of a cult classic over the years due to the influence of the art by Mike Mignola and the fans' affinity with the characters of Milo and the lost Disney princess that is Kita. Google Atlantis fan art to get a better idea of that. So you see the fan art, you see cons, people dressing up as these characters. So nerd culture has really embraced it, but that tends to be a trend where Disney, as we said, are not keen to promote this film. Not many people know about it or like it, so you have those pockets of the fan community who really embrace it. I can see why they did.
Okay, this was the first year of the Best Animated Feature, Ken. Mm-hmm. For 2001, into the award in 2002. Nominated were Shrek, which won.
Of course.
And Shrek is great, so I understand Shrek winning. Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius and Monsters, Inc. They only nominated 3. They couldn't even throw Atlantis in there.
Throw him a bone, come on.
Ugh.
This is the first Disney film that's explicitly aimed at, older teens or adults with no cute sidekicks or talking animals. So I wouldn't describe this as a kid's film, so I think that's notable as well. We have a bit of controversy though, Gar.
Wait, I want to go back to the Oscars for a second. What's the first Disney animated feature to win an Academy Award for Best Animated Feature?
Okay. Bolt?
No, it's Frozen.
Or is it?
They went until 2013 without winning a Best Animated Feature award.
Wow.
Like Brave, Rango, Toy Story 3, Up, it's basically Pixar,
Yes.
WALL-E, Ratatouille, Happy Feet, Wallace and Gromit, The Incredibles, Finding Nemo, Spirited Away, and Shrek all won awards before Disney did. How crazy is that?
That's a weird piece of trivia, isn't it?
Yeah, because like Lilo and Stitch, that's people love Spirited Away. All right, I'll give it to that. But yeah, isn't that amazing?
I would have put money on Bolt or Princess and the Frog winning.
Maybe even Tangled?
Yeah.
But then Tangled was in the year. Tangled wasn't even nominated. What's wrong with these people?
Yeah, so Disney were on the way back, but it took them a long time to receive that recognition again. We have...
No, I'm stuck on this. Sorry. Because like Lilo and Stitch was nominated. Brother Bear was nominated. And then the next Disney animated feature to be nominated after that was Bolt. Princess the Frog. For some reason, Tangled didn't get nominated. What's wrong with them? Tangled was great.
Tangled, for me, was the official sign that they were back.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry to give away my take there for a future episode.
Yeah, when we get back to it, and that's actually not that long away. That's like 7 episodes away. But yes, controversy, Ken. What was the controversy aside from the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature?
At the time of release, some viewers noticed that Atlantis The Lost Empire bore a number of similarities to the 1990-1991 Japanese anime television program Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water.
Well, it's not the first time they've ripped off an anime move for move.
So, people noticed similarities in the characters, the setting and the story. The directors claimed to have never seen it and only heard about it after the production was over when they were criticised. Some people at the Gainax studio that created Nadia urged their parent company to take on Disney, but much like The Lion King, they didn't dare.
Suddenly they're like, we don't see the resemblance at all.
Yeah, they didn't dare take on the Disney lawyers. Critics also saw parallels with the 1986 film Laputa Castle in the Sky by Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli, which Atlantis directors Truesdale and Kirk both admittedly acknowledged Miyazaki's work as a major influence on their own work. Like, if they're fans of Japanese anime, Gar, it's entirely plausible that they've seen both films.
Alright, Nadia and The Secret of Blue Water. Nadia doesn't look the same. I'll push back on that, as I'm now going to Google it. Because, the problem is most of these probably have the same source influences.
That's true. The Nadia television show was based on the works of Jules Verne as well.
Really, they're all just aping Jules Verne.
But there was some stuff around crystals, which wasn't strictly Verne, that Disney used in this film. So.
Strictly looking at... After searching for it on Google, I dismiss the resemblance. So, there you go.
Gar's being judge, jury, and executioner there. You're dismissing their claim.
Basically, entirely based on scrolling Google Images after searching for the name of it. I'm like, nah, not really. As opposed to the freaking White Lion one. What's the name of that line?
Kimba the White Lion.
Kimba the White Lion, which is shot for shot stolen, but still.
So Atlantis, Gar, great characters, great action, pleasing animation. I think I'm going to award this the status of hidden gem.
Yeah, it's up there with The Great Mouse Detective as films you have not heard about nearly enough, but are actually really, really good.
All right, Disney explorers, we've nearly come to the end of the show for another week. Resident musical expert Nicole is coming up in just a few minutes with a song inspired by this week's movie. It's a highlight of the show every week, so be sure to stick around for that after our closing spiel. New episodes of Magic by Design drop every Monday, where all magical podcasts are downloaded. Stop by our website at magicbydesign.buzzsprout.com to find a full list of podcast platforms. A lot of P's in that sentence. We are literally everywhere: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, you name it, we're on it. We've been doing this quite a while, so be sure to check out the website to find the entire back catalogue if you're catching up, or are feeling nostalgic for your favourite episode.
Or your least favourite. If you want to hear us bury things, go for Aristocats or Dinosaur.
Or Saludos Amigos.
Oh yeah, those are the three, bury them 6 feet under. So if you want to feel shit, or hate listen to me really not liking The Emperor's New Groove.
Oh yeah, Gary, you're going to get hate mail for that. We are also active on all your favourite social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Magic by Design Pod, on Twitter at Magic Design Pod, and on the Insta at Magic by Design Pod. So you're a fan of the show, you want all your friends to know about it, and you're asking yourself, what can you do? Well, there are a number of things. If you want to support the show, please do consider giving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. 5 stars only, please. You can also share the podcast on your socials or recommend the show to a fellow Disney fan. If you give us a 5-star review, you will receive an annual 2-week slot in a timeshare located in the heart of downtown Atlantis.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know how to swim, so that wouldn't be very good for me.
So you just have to procure a submarine and a team of misfits to help you get there, and you may die. Sorry. We will be back next week at the same time, same place, with a review of Disney's 42nd animated feature. Get ready to be excited, Gar. It's Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah, we're finally there. We finally hit the peak, the true renaissance.
But until then, stay safe and remember, our lives are measured by the gifts that we leave our children. Now then, Nicole is waiting in the wings with her take on Where the Dream Takes You from the Atlantis the Lost Empire soundtrack, but before she enthralls you with her siren song, she has reclaimed some fun facts about the music of the film thought to be lost to the ages. Thanks for listening. Now over to you, Nicole.
Hello there, my Disney lovers. It's me, your musical correspondent Nicole, coming to you live from my bedroom. This week we're going deep into the sea in search of Atlantis. I must admit this is not a movie I watched as a kid, but I did watch it in college. Classic procrastination. The movie is scored completely by James Newton Howard. Howard had composed different themes for the surface world and Atlantis. For Atlantis, he uses a lot of chimes, gongs and bells, said to be an Indonesian orchestral sound. Howard also had to emotionally convey the feelings through music within some of the scenes where there was very little dialogue. Directors Kirk Wise and Gary Truesdale agreed that this movie would not be a classic Disney musical. However, the marketing department insisted on a song for the credits as per tradition. So, James Newton Howard teamed up with American songwriter Diane Warren to compose Where the Dream Takes You, sung by Maya. We'll all remember her from Lady Marmalade. It borrowed from the orchestral score and fitted the theme of self-discovery. Critics were very harsh, calling this song a generic R&B hit that lacked substance. Critics were also very harsh towards Maya, saying her performance was unimpressive and the track could have worked better with a more seasoned vocalist. The song was nominated for an award for Best Original Song for Film at the World Soundtrack Awards, so it couldn't be that bad. I personally really like it. Come Sail Away by rock group Styx was also in various advertisements for the film, but is not played in the film itself. So, after all my chat of that one song out of the film, it's no surprise to you that I'm going to do Where the Dream Takes You. I hope you enjoy it. They'll try to hold you back, and they will say you're wrong. They will never understand the journey that you're on. They'll try to change your mind. They'll try to change your heart, but they will never understand who you are, and you still believe. And you know you must go where the dream takes you, where your heart longs to be. When you finally find that place, you'll find all you need, where the dream takes you. There's something in your soul, that won't be denied. It's a fatal dream that keeps the dream alive, so you still believe. And you know you must go where the dream takes you, where the heart longs to be. When you finally found that you must go, where the dream takes